public school things. And okay, you guys got it?
Got it.
Cool. Okay, hey, hello everyone. Today is October 18th, 2015, and you're looking at episode 14 of At Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and beside me is Laurel Black.
Hey.
And we have Megan Arns.
Hello.
And Ben Charles.
Hi, everybody.
So our guest this week is ABD DMA candidate at the Juilliard School, and we're not exactly sure, but I think he's approximately like the second or third DMA from Juilliard in percussion, like ever in history. So I think that's really cool. Let's see what else. Mike Truesdell teaches at Rutgers. He's regular faculty at the Zeltzman Marimba Festival. He's played at PASIC like freaking all the time. He's all over New York doing all this cool new music stuff, and in my opinion, he just eats new music alive like it's oatmeal, just like no problem.
Apple cinnamon kind.
Apple cinnamon oatmeal. So anyway, and also in all seriousness, I've seen Mike Truesdell perform many times over the years and doing different things, and as soon as I think, oh yeah, Mike Truesdell is like, this is the thing he's best at, I see him do something else, and I go like, wait, but he's like also the best at that, you know. So it's like I haven't seen him have a weak percussion weakness yet. So anyway, please welcome Mike Truesdell. How's it going?
That's great. Thanks, Casey. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I know I'm so well spoken sometimes.
Hey, that's great. It's one of the warmest welcomes I've ever gotten.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. How is your dissertation going, my friend?
The first draft is in. And I have 2 more stages after this. So there's a submission to my advisor now, then the committee, and then the final draft.
And is this your first proposal?
The subject of Soldier's Tale?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
cool.
This was one of the things that I thought about since the very beginning of thinking about what to write my dissertation on.
I only ask because I've heard so many scary stories about people making like many proposals, and they get their proposal approved and it goes through, and that takes forever. Then once someone on the committee says, no, actually I think this isn't a good idea, and it can take just so long even just to get it through.
Yeah, well, it's interesting for anybody who's out there listening and interested in going into a program for DMA, PhD. I'm not totally qualified to talk about, but DMA, one of the latter things that you're going to do is probably a dissertation in your program. And what I felt is that there were so many things that over the course of my master's program that I was thinking about as subject matter, and I thought about the DMA even from my very first year of master's, and I was starting to just keep notes of things that I started to become interested in. And when it came time for submitting a dissertation proposal, I went into the chair of the committee with about 4 or 5 subjects that I knew that I would really enjoy talking about. So it's not something that you can really think up earlier that year or something and really get a full glimpse of everything that in which you're interested.
Yeah, cool. What
was one of the runner-up topics?
I was really interested. I did my undergrad at a place called Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, and nothing could be more recommended for somebody, for me. And my maybe Rutgers isn't going to like that, but Rutgers is great too. But I had an absolutely brilliant percussion professor there, Dane Richardson. The curriculum at Lawrence is very unique because it's equally balanced among things like what people would call Western percussion ensemble and also different kinds of world music. So the African drumming and dancing ensemble from music from Ghana generally is really heavy, and Cuba and Brazil. So the music that I was interested in was a lot of that African diaspora music. So I thought of one concept, and if anybody out there takes it, you got to credit me. But but I thought about writing from the fusion of the musics of Europe and Africa, and how that became what we know as Cuban music, which then filtered into the United States and became a part of almost every pop music that we can think of right now. So like how that that Iberian Peninsula, the music from there came to Cuba and fused with African music. So I thought about that, but
Yeah.
and that would have been really fun. But the idea of Soldier's Tale eventually prevailed.
Why did it prevail, by the way? And also, who has anyone played it? I played it in undergrad. Anybody
I
else?
have not.
I have not.
Okay. Why did it? What made you so passionate about that, Mike?
Well, one of the things that's really unique about Soldier's Tale, and I think that people realized it at the time, like based on the newspaper articles that were reviews of the very first performances. People really understood that this was something completely unique. So the way that these interdisciplinary things can commingle and interact and become this new art form that was this traveling theater, essentially. And I saw you had Ian Rosenbaum on the podcast, who's awesome. And I think I met him first at CMF. So hi to Ian if he's there. But he's doing something that's similar now.
He told us he'll never watch again. He told us I'll never.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, then never mind. Now we can talk honestly and openly. But he's doing something that's really neat right now with a traveling theater where I think they outfit a U-Haul and they travel around to different areas and they have essentially their show in this U-Haul. Which is a modern take on Soldier's Tale, because the idea of Soldier's Tale is a traveling theatrical group that is less expensive, smaller, and also something that they can pack up the sets and they can be completely self-contained. So I thought that this was this interdisciplinary interaction was so unique and so progressive that it was very intriguing to me, and it's also a practical problem for anybody who's had to deal with performing Soldier's Tale at all. You would understand the inherent problems in the percussion part itself and the different conflicting additions and instrument choices. And everybody who's worked with Stravinsky puts out their own edition and they say, well, Stravinsky said that my version is the correct one. But then somebody else comes along and says the same thing, so where does that leave us as performers? And I feel that, at least in my experience, that there's people out there who look at Soldier's Tale and they say, oh, wait, it's this kind of setup thing, and there's dancers, and there's a speaker, and it's a weird group of instruments, and I have like 9 different versions of this percussion part, and it gets slightly overwhelming sometimes, and that leads to either performances that could be uninformed, and then also it could lead to people just putting the piece down and going to find something else, which I think is a complete mistake.
It's such a neat piece, and theater-wise too. Like there's and you'll have to remind me, but there's the devil, there's the narrator is one of the characters, and the thing that really stands out in my mind that I thought was really clever in the writing is at one point. Well, and then there's the soldier. At one point, the narrator like steps out of his narrator character and like kind of steps into the scene and basically tells the soldier to get it together, come on, like stand up, do it, and kind of gets frustrated with the character. Anyway, it's clever.
Oh, it's totally unique, though, right? I mean, we'll
have to ask a theater person. Maybe it's not, but I think it was.
Stravinsky quotes. They cite that they got the inspiration from the way that Pirandello uses the narrator, but I think that this is something that's completely interesting in the way that you have this third-party role, which is somebody whose job is essentially to be an omniscient describer of the action, but in all actuality, they end up participating, like you said, and that's just one more thing that you can add to this collaboration. So the person who did the libretto is Charles Ferdinand Ramuz, and he was somebody who worked so hard at getting these, like this libretto A+. And so they did so many different versions of the libretto, and it turned out to be something that's just really unique. So it makes me excited about looking into it further every day.
Do any of you know the piece by Charles Delancey called "For the Love of Histoire"? It's a percussion solo.
Yeah.
Okay. So and I want to ask Mike, did you look at that at all? Did that play into your research at all?
That actually didn't play into my research. I've only honestly I've only heard it a couple times, and I know that as somebody who's writing his dissertation, he should know about it. So maybe I should look into it. But I was concerned mostly with the piece itself and how that transpired. And I think what Charles did was use elements of the piece to create his own solo. Is that how it is?
I think so. Yeah, I played it myself a long time ago, and I've had students play it. But it is the Soldier's Tale setup, and the title "Love of Histoire" is from the original title "Histoire du Soldat." So I guess it's saying for the love of the history, and it's talking about the tale, the soldier's tale. So it's that percussion setup, and there's a lot of the same licks and a lot of the exact same things. But then it also borrows like themes from the rest of the ensemble and tries to make little melodies out of that, and it's a nice piece for for anybody, but I think especially students. Like it's a nice intermediate percussion solo.
Yeah.
Nice.
I actually my dissertation was on incorporating multi-percussion into the undergraduate curriculum, and that was one of the pieces that I used in there about like it's rare that you find like a good intermediate multi-percussion piece.
I thought we were talking about Mike Truesdell's dissertation, Ben. I'm sorry.
So often, like we like for beginning percussion students, like we throw like Ray-Bans at them or something that's like super hard, and you know like we need somewhere to start, and that's I think a great piece.
Oh well, that's interesting because I also feel the same way, and I remember my introduction into multiple percussion being I want to do a multiple percussion piece or a setup piece, and then okay, well, what's out there? Xenakis is out there. Okay, well, that's where I'm going to start. And I think that almost everybody, at least from our generation, is kind of in the same boat, and it's just only starting right now, Ben, probably because of the things that you're researching, that we're finding pieces that can smooth along that transition. For me, that UDAO book of etudes seems to be a really good standby for me to introduce students to the concept of dealing with multi-timbral setups and having to manipulate different kind of notation and things like that. But what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think you pretty much said it right there. I mean, like my first multi-percussion piece also was Ray-Bans. Which is
what?
Yeah,
oh my God!
I mean, not when I was like 18 years old. Like I started late on multi-percussion, but like, yeah, not too many college, I'll say, underclassmen where I went to school. Really, at any of the programs I went to, Miami's an exception, but the other two schools I went to, none of the kind of underclassmen were really playing multi-percussion works. And part of it is because we're so busy learning marimba technique and snare drum technique that it's hard to work that in. But yeah, there's the piece Casey mentioned, and then also the Craft French Suite and English Suite are also other great, like, my first multi-percussion piece type pieces, I think.
Mitchell Peters Rondo. There's a... Anyway, yeah.
There
and
is
then also
there's some. No, there's certainly a whole. Yeah.
Casey, what's your? I can't remember the name of the small multi-percussion piece that you have, like with the wood blocks and triangles.
My piece?
Yeah.
With the Bilotti trinome.
Yeah.
Stillness that better suits this machine.
That's the one. Yeah, that's another like great.
Like
it's not Ray-Bans, but it's a kind of exploration of different timbres.
Yeah.
Andy Bliss has a book too of multi-percussion solos with the same setup.
It's called, I think it's called Multitudes or something like that.
It's super important to introduce multi-percussion early too, because with contemporary music becoming such a more important part of what we do, and different groups forming. Especially, I mean, at our school, there are several student-run new music groups that are kind of popping up, and so students are being introduced to contemporary music at younger and younger ages, it seems like, and they need to know how to deal with a multi-percussion setup and how to problem solve early on. So I find it just as important as teaching marimba technique now is to introduce them to multi-percussion solos early on, you know.
We probably spoiled a lot of your segment already.
Casey spoiled my segment completely because I was going to talk about Soldier's Tale, but I'll still do it.
No, that's cool. Hey, I've got 150 pages for you.
So one thing that's interesting that we were just talking about, like multi-percussion is always like the last thing to kind of get thrown on in degree programs, is actually in the 20th century, it was one of the first percussion movements we had was this idea of going toward multi-percussion. So I guess it fell by the wayside, especially when marimba technique came around. But yeah, so if you think about the time Soldier's Tale was written, which was in like the early 1900s, it was right after World War I. So Europe was in a huge economic depression, and the idea of like writing a piece for a 200-piece orchestra or something like just wasn't really all that feasible. So like we had talked about, there was kind of this idea of like, can we sort of create a small-scale traveling orchestra almost that can play and make money? So that's exactly why Stravinsky wrote Soldier's Tale. It was almost an economic decision, and going along with that idea, instead of hiring a snare drummer, a bass drummer, a cymbal player, can we kind of combine all the percussion section into one person? So you see a lot of pieces from that era, the Hindemith camera music, the Copland music for the theater, Soldier's Tale, of course, and several others that aren't coming to mind right now, all use this idea of like one percussionist as a substitute for a percussion section, which I think is kind of something different than maybe like Stephen Schick multi-percussion, which is very soloistic. I think that comes out of the same vein, but they're related, but not the same, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, getting on to Soldier's Tale, it was written by Stravinsky. It was premiered in Lausanne, Sweden. Sorry, Switzerland, not Sweden, different country. Lausanne, Switzerland, September 28th, 1918. It's written for 3 pairs of instruments plus percussion. So there's high-low pairs of strings, which is violin and double bass, woodwinds, which is clarinet and bassoon, and brass, which is cornet, which is often played on trumpet now, and trombone, plus the multi-percussion setup, which is kind of interesting to me that there's actually like, there's always this duality to it, except for the percussion soloist. So then there was also, shortly thereafter, a concert suite of 5 movements for clarinet, violin, and piano. That obviously there's no percussion in that, so we won't spend any time talking about that. That was premiered in 1919, though. So Stravinsky wrote Soldier's Tale in a very, we'll call it unique notation system, where everyone's seen these sorts of percussion pieces where there's one line for triangle, one line for snare drum, one line for bass drum, and so on. And it's not very user-friendly because instead of like a 5-line staff, you have this thing that takes up like a half a page that you're trying to read. And also the notes are not beamed together, so you have all these little pinpoints of notes. That's just kind of a mess to read. So as Mike mentioned earlier, several people have gone through and made their own versions of it. Probably the most famous, which is Bill Kraft, has actually made a version of it, and he worked with Stravinsky on trying to figure out exactly what sounds he was talking about, because, for example, Stravinsky just wrote for drum, which most people interpret as snare drum, but as it turns out, according to Kraft, Stravinsky actually meant a field drum. So there's quite a few Percussive Notes articles written about it. There's quite a bit of discussion about this. Someone, apparently Mike Truesdell, is writing a dissertation on it to make it less daunting for all of us. So that's kind of the piece in a nutshell. And I have to say, one thing when I look at these historical pieces, like we talked about the Bartok a few weeks ago, I love to see the weird markings on them. And there's this one indication on Dance of the Devil and Soldier's Tale that the two snare drums are supposed to be placed in a vertical position, like with their heads facing each other. And I'm reading off of another score that has an English translation, but I heard at one point it was supposed to be played actually with like a whale's tusk bone or something like that, that you play back and forth between the two drums to ensure a mechanical rhythm, which seems way harder to do in time than to actually just play it normally with two sticks. So it's, I think, often now common to be played in the normal position, which I've heard Stravinsky did indeed approve. And another kind of funny anecdote from all of this is that everyone wants to get the definitive answers on Soldier's Tale. And I think it was Bill Kraft, or maybe it was someone else, when he was working with Stravinsky on trying to determine all this stuff, he asked Stravinsky a question, and Stravinsky basically said, "I wrote this piece 50 years ago, I can't remember." So I think, with a lot of music, and with especially early percussion music, where things weren't as standardized as they are now, you're often left interpreting what the composer meant, and very much interpreting to your own, standard of what you thought they meant or what you think sounds best for a piece. So that's kind of the gist of Soldier's Tale, and I'm sure Mike can fill us on more details that I missed.
I love that you said,
There's
I love that you said Stravinsky was like, I wrote this so long ago, like I don't care. Like I think that all the time. Like we get so particular. Like
I remember I had a student like a few months ago that was playing one of Casey's snare drum pieces, and I the instructions on Casey's piece versus what Casey did on his YouTube video were opposite.
What?
And,
no, they weren't. Dude,
my student was very determined to get it right, so I asked Casey, and Casey was like, "I don't know, do whatever you want, it's fine."
Dude, get it together, man.
Casey's like, "Dude, I wrote that piece 2 years ago. I can't remember what I meant."
Well, it's true, and I know I get frustrated. Like we'll put so much attention into that first drag on Lieutenant Kiji or something, which actually the orchestra's doing here right now. It's just like dude, if you had Prokofiev in the room and you were like, so do you want it more, and we had the conversation we had with each other, with the composer, they would just be like, dude, I don't care. What are you talking about?
I've heard.
What the hell are you even talking about? How do you guys even care
I
about?
always wonder with orchestral composers with excerpts, would they have not written it if they knew what we did to it? Like Kiji, it's we're so scientific about it, which I'm not knocking. I think that's a great thing, but I have to wonder. But the story that comes to mind for me is I heard Bill Schumann on his symphony with that xylophone excerpt, Symphony Number 3, right? With the xylophone excerpt, and he says 4. Is it 4?
I think
right?
4, yeah.
4. Yeah. Schumann 4,
the Schumann
the xylophone.
Symphony
It's 3,
Number
right?
3 is the one with the xylophone.
Oh,
yeah.
3.
That's Casey. Why I'm a doctor and you're not.
Dude, I'm happy. Dude, hey, symphony number this, symphony number.
All right, that's just crude. But no. So he writes, octaves optional, and I heard that someone asked him about, why are octaves optional, and Schumann just said, I just thought in case it needed to be louder, we could put it in octaves, without realizing the tremendous difficulty that adds to the excerpt.
I think it's really intriguing, but sometimes we have to understand what the scope is of our task. So. For me, as somebody who never personally met Stravinsky and never worked with him, who am I to say what the definitive version of this piece is? So I don't think that anybody can tell us now what the definitive version of the piece. I can go travel and go see Stravinsky's places where he lived and worked, and I can visit his manuscripts and look at his correspondences and things like that, and determine the best I can about maybe what the initial intention may have been. But we should think about putting ourselves in his shoes also when we're thinking about this. And one of the really amazing things to think about is what that's like to be somebody who's at the forefront of something like that. So think about what's it like to be John Cage and composing that first percussion solo. What's it like to be Stravinsky when nobody's really done this before? Maybe his closest thing that he could latch on to was trap kit drumming from the ragtime era. But what happens when you go to Lausanne and you have a studio that has all these drums that you've bought, and there's nobody there to tell you, like, that's how we do it. So that's what's really amazing about Stravinsky, is that nobody told him that, yeah, actually we put drums on stands, and you don't put them on their side, and you don't play them like this.
And you don't drop a tambourine on the floor.
You don't, right?
Yeah.
Like, come on, folks.
If I could just interject real quick, what Mike's talking about reminds me of. Have any of you guys played the Mio La Creation?
Yes, yes, the wacky drum set.
He didn't know exactly what a drum set was, so he just described what he saw. So he's saying like long, thin drum, and what he means is floor tom. But yeah, like he didn't realize that he could have actually. I mean, now of course anyone would just write drum set, but back then like you had to describe like, oh, a snare drum plus 2 narrow drums without snares, and floor. It's really weird to think that someone had to like think about it like that.
So when we played that, I did all this research to get like the authentic kit, and I even like rigged up a thing that would hook to the bass drum pedal to hit the splash cymbal, which like I read somewhere you were supposed to do, and I did like all this stuff and got it all together and tried to make like the most accurate drum set I could from what PAS articles told me I should do. And then I brought that contraption to rehearsal, and our conductor was just like, "What is that? Like, it's for drum set. What is this?" And I was like, so like we pulled out like a rock and roll drum set, and it was a drag.
I had a friend that played it under. Oh God, what's the guy? He's written Gunther Schuller. I had a friend that played that piece under Gunther Schuller, and he had him play like a lot of the bass drum parts actually on like a small concert bass drum.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to. Yeah, that's what you should do.
Which is probably very similar to the bass drums they had back then. But yeah, and apparently Gunther Schuller like made all sorts of changes, like leave out this part, that, and he said everything was too loud. So yeah, like what do you do when a conductor's like that?
Yeah.
But I mean, we can also think about something like going back to like the interest in Janissary music in Vienna, right? And we think about like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony as one of these major points where we have the Janissary band that comes into the Western Concert Hall. And you think, okay, well you can analyze this and say, all right, so what Beethoven was hearing was this Janissary band, and it wasn't the bass drum, and it wasn't the triangle, and it wasn't the cymbals. It was actually these antiquated Janissary instruments. And isn't that wild? So okay, let's analyze that. And now we're going to come into orchestra rehearsal, and I'm going to put jingles and snares onto my bass drum. And like, let's see how far that goes. Right? But I mean, that's kind of the same thing. Like, we're going back and we're analyzing this and we're doing the best we can. And maybe if you don't end up showing people like all the things that you know at once, I think that investigative research, like what Casey's talking about, like going back and getting that exact sound, it can only help you. And I mean, it's for anybody who's like still with us in the podcast and is like thinking about things as they go through, like maybe their undergraduate school or something, and it's so easy to just say, oh, what is it? Crash cymbals? All right, here's my crash cymbals. But it's that extra step that's really going to help you push and develop as you get further and further along.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you got, Ben?
What? I did my segment.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. My bad. Okay, I got editing to do. Megan, what do you got?
Okay, so I wanted to do, for my segment, Mike, I usually do something on a current event or something, and nice. So with PASIC coming up very soon, I wanted to do a little bit of a PASIC preview about the biggest category, which seems to be the drum set category this year, and
Cool.
I think most years. But there are 19 drum set clinics happening. And when I kind of scanned the list, I recognized some, but I didn't recognize a lot. And so I was really curious, who are these people? Where are they coming from? What are their backgrounds? Is it different types of music? Things like that. So rather than like reading everyone's bio, I thought it might be kind of fun to just take one interesting fact about each of these people. And like I said, there are 19 of them. And just some interesting facts that popped out to me at first is that there's most of them seem to be from the U.S. or currently live in the U.S. 6 of them are international, from Germany, Hungary, Israel, Japan, and Canada. And there's 18 men, 1 woman. All of them, when you're reading their bio, what?
I said, who's the female one?
Anika Nilles. She's from Germany. She's incredible. But, you know, you're reading their bios and it's like everyone, all 19 of these people have played with everyone, have played all over the world. They have multiple albums to their credit. You know, just all incredible drum set players. So it's really cool that all of them are, you know, you could potentially go get advice and see them play for 50 minutes to an hour. One interesting fact that multiple of them had in common was that they started playing at a very young age in church, like in their worship bands. So I thought that was interesting too. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of run down the list really quick, and if I pronounce any of these names wrong, please just jump in and correct me, because like I said, I didn't know who some of these people were. Okay, Leon Dugu Chancler. He often works as what?
No?
Dugu? Yeah. Often works at a studio.
That's not the same guy?
No.
Never mind.
Yeah.
I'm making stuff out.
It's the guy who you think it is.
It's Michael
Okay.
Jackson's drummer, right?
Yeah.
You ruined it! Oh!
Oh, yeah.
He ruined my segment. He ruined Megan's segment. We're done.
I
was saying-
you guys name
No,
it.
I was saying how to pronounce it. I was saying how to pronounce the dude's name. Mike, okay, time out. Mike Truesdell, how do you pronounce this dude's name?
I think we should rewind, edit, and have Megan do it, and we're all going to act surprised.
I'm continuing.
Okay.
Anyway, he often works as a studio percussionist, and he can be heard on many hit records, from jazz to blues to pop. And his kind of claim to his biggest fun fact is that he was on the studio recording of Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. So that's super cool. Next person, Mark Kullenberg is a drummer in New York City. He's from St. Louis, as am I, so that was a fun fact to me. He recently won a Grammy, and he's doing a masterclass, but he's also playing in the Friday night concert at PASIC. Dave Ilitch, he's from Los Angeles. He's the drummer for Mars Volta, which, you know, is currently not playing. They entered a hiatus in 2012, but now he's the drummer for another band called the Daughters of Mara.
Cool.
Matt Garstka, he's the drummer for Animals as Leaders. Mark Juliana, he's the drummer, composer, and leader of the band called Beat Music. Gerald Hayward, he's a huge R&B drummer, and just to name a couple of people that he's played with, Blackstreet, Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Missy Elliott, Puff Daddy, Brandy, Mary L. Blige, and Coolio, and most recently with Chris Brown and Beyonce, so it's crazy. Ralph Humphrey, a drummer from LA, big in the recording industry. He's played for a variety of motion picture and TV and record projects, and most recently he was the drummer on American Idol, American Juniors, the Emmy Awards, Star Trek, Enterprise, The Simpsons, Charmed, Family Guy, American Dad, so lots of TV stuff. Akira Jimbo is definitely one that I'm familiar with from Japan. He's a Japanese freelance fusion drummer, and he's really famous for his independence and fusion of electronic drum technology and acoustic drums. Just ridiculous drummer. Larnell Lewis, who often plays with Snarky Puppy. This guy is 25 years old. He lives in Toronto. There's an interesting interview with him on Drummer Zone, and about how he kind of saved Snarky Puppy once, because I guess Snarky Puppy's main drummer, Robert Sputzy Wright, forgot to renew his passport, and so Larnell Michael League, the band leader, called Larnell up and called him in at the last second. He I can't remember where this was being recorded, but he flew internationally and recorded this record. He often subs with them too, but super great drummer. Chris McHugh from Nashville, he's one of the top session drummers in Nashville, and he's toured with Amy Grant and Garth Brooks. Moritz Müller is from Germany. He's an upcoming German drummer, and the band that he has created, plays with mostly, is called Intersphere. Also from Germany, Anika Nilles. She won the Hit Like a Girl contest for females, and we interviewed her, Mindy Siegel-Abovitz, who is the editor and creator of Tom Tom magazine, which is a magazine all about female drummers. She interviewed her for Rhythm Scene, and she's on the cover of Rhythm Scene in October. And so, since I mentioned there's only one female drummer, I thought I would just pick one question that Mindy asked Anika in the interview. How has being a female in this industry helped or hurt your experience? And she said, I honestly don't think that much about the fact that I'm a female drummer. Sometimes I even forget it. I grew up thinking it was normal to be a female drummer and haven't had that many bad experiences in my life. However, I can think of 2 difficult situations from a few years ago. Once I didn't get a job because they decided to take the male drummer in the band instead of a girl. Another situation was when I was rehearsing with a new building band, and we started playing, and the guitar player stopped and said, I'm sorry, but it's so unusual for me to have a female playing on the drums. So that was kind of a weird situation, she said. In contrast to this, I have had more positive experiences with nice and lovely feedback from other musicians or the audience. Of course, there are also these, oh, there's a female drummer, let's check it out and stay and see how she hits the drums situations. I think one benefit of being a female drummer is that you can get that rapid attention, but it also shows how unusual it still is to be a female on this instrument. Especially in Germany, there aren't many female drummers, so it's still a different thing for the society if they bump into us. So, and Anika has a lot of great online videos, and I feel like she talks about this in the interview, but a lot of her fame has come from these videos that she's produced. She's composed her own music, and she'll play along to these tracks, and just really, really, really impressive drumming. And she's just become a kind of YouTube sensation as well. And now she's been invited to some of the big drum festivals, and so it'll be really cool to see her at PASIC too.
I knew her name. Oh, sorry. There's more.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I knew her name because of, I was going to say, like a Facebook post.
Yeah.
I had the same conversation about being a female a female percussionist with Julia Gaines, actually.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And Julia Gaines is Megan's department chair. And she said, very interestingly, I thought that it has never bothered her whatsoever, because we were talking about someone and, like, the old boys club, as they put it, and she said it's just never bothered her even a little bit. She never even. I thought it was cool. Okay, Ben.
Can I actually talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Wait, Ben, do you need to say something?
I was just going to say kind of like a similar interesting story from music history. Are you guys familiar with the Strauss Burlesque for piano?
Yes.
There's a timpani excerpt to go along with it. But when Strauss first wrote Burlesque, it was said to be unplayable. And from what I hear, he revised it quite a bit. But when it was finally performed, it was said, this is a piece that a woman will never be able to perform. It's too difficult for a woman. Which then, like, now Martha Argerich is now Martha Argerich is probably the greatest pianist in the world, in my humble opinion, anyway, and just rips the burlesque to shreds. So it's like, what is this like? This like, female, can't. I don't get it. Anyway,
Yeah,
Megan Laurel
it's a
and her
different
also, by
time,
the
and
way.
I feel like if it really bothered you, I think it'd just be really hard to be in the field,
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think,
Right, but you also are setting yourself up for failure when you say something like that. I mean, anytime that you say, well, this is never going to be able to be played, or
Yeah.
whatever, then you're, it's just like, oh, well, guess what? Like, there's going to be a 5-year-old that can do it
Yeah,
in a day.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But also, it reminded me, Megan, when you were talking about the story about how she was playing in a band, and then the person said it's really bizarre to have a woman playing drum set. Like, it made me think about collaborative pianists working with vocalists, and how there's actually at least from the people that I've talked to and that I know, that sometimes, even though it really sounds bad to say, like, they prefer to have either a man or a woman playing piano with them. So, like, it's something that it makes them feel more comfortable to have a male or a female pianist playing behind them. Now, I'm sure that there's some people that don't have that, and you might have people that write in that completely disagree with me. But at least in my experience, it's really interesting that when you're in a band, like, not to say that having a man or a woman playing drums is better than the other, but sometimes it makes somebody feel more comfortable. So, like, there's probably people out there who also could come back with another story that says, you know, there's a guy playing drum set back there, but I mean, I would feel much more comfortable there's a woman back there. So I don't know. It's an interesting story.
And it's also the question of, like, what are people used to? You know, if you get used to something, and it's just, Do
you know that a certain composer will write so-la instead of solo to indicate the solo voice should be, like, feminine, and that composer is Stravinsky? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's common. Maybe other composers do that too. But I found out about it in some Stravinsky example. I thought it was really cool.
Interesting.
What is that? Wait, you mean like in like an orchestration?
Mm-hmm. So instead of S-O-L-O, it's S-O-L-A. So it feminizes the indication.
Wow. Are you sure he didn't just, like, trip or something?
It could be. No, it could be. Yeah.
But that's really interesting. I'll look into that. That's really cool.
That would actually be cool to look into, because I say these things I've learned so long ago, and who knows if I'm mixing it up or something. But yeah, that's how I remember it.
Wow.
You're going to be credited in his dissertation now, so that's awesome.
I thought it was Stravinsky. Yeah, so-la. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't come across it in Soldier's Tale specifically. I haven't
not there. Yeah.
Yeah, gone in very, very deeply to anything else. I'm sorry, I interrupted Megan.
It's okay. It's okay. We're almost through the list. This is good.
We're at the R's.
Okay. Jim, we've got some Rileys coming up here. Jim Riley, Nashville, drummer and band leader for the Rascal Flatts. John Riley, I think we all know his book, The Art of Bop Drumming. But from 1976 to 78, he was the drummer for the Woody Herman Band, and he's also been the drummer for the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra for 25 years. Ed Roschetti from Michigan. It seems like he has a ton of publications through Hal Leonard. He's got World Beat Rhythm Series from Brazil, Africa, Cuba, and the U.S., and he has a bunch of other books too. But he's a drummer, composer, author, and educator. Oh, also, he has an iPhone app called Gangnam Bongo Jam and Holiday Classics app. So maybe check those out. I haven't looked for them yet, but could be interesting. Okay, next, Peter Sandofi. He's from Hungary. He's one of the most frequently employed drummers in Hungary. And there's also a Rhythm Scene article about him in the October issue as well. He is interviewed by Mariusz Mokarski, which reminds me, sorry, this is totally a tangent, but Mike, you look like Mike Markowski, the wind ensemble composer. Have you ever met him before?
I've never met him.
He lives in New York City, and he came and did a residency here last year, and the whole time he was here, I was like, he looks exactly like Mike Truesdell. He looks exactly like Mike Truesdell. It was so weird. Anyway.
Is it difficult to have somebody so stunningly gorgeous walking around the halls?
It was really distracting, yeah.
I know, right. Yeah, I mean,
Anyway.
tell me about it. Anytime I walk into the bathroom, it's really distracting for me. Yeah.
So anyway, Mariusz Mokarski interviewed Peter, and I wanted to just read one quote from him, because the interview in his clinic is going to focus on hybrid drum sets, electronic and acoustic drum kits. And Peter says, I think hybrid drumming is a very fast-growing, adequate, and popular solution to using acoustic drumming and electronic devices systems at the same time. The technology itself is growing really fast. You can find several devices that offer lots of possibilities and fast processors that work perfectly without any latency. Therefore, these instruments are being brought into the live music scene as well as the studio with much more frequency. I think sometimes we just talk about, electronic drum kits versus acoustic drum kits, and we leave these hybrid kits out of the conversation. So I think that's going to be a really interesting clinic, and you can look up the article too and read the whole thing there. Next, Chad Wackerman, jazz fusion rock drummer. He was the percussionist in Frank Zappa's band, and Rashid Williams, drummer for John Legend. Holy cow! He's a self-taught musician, started playing at the age of 3. And finally, Nur Zidyahu, who's Israeli. He's a well-established studio session drummer. He played drums for 8 songs on Genesis's 1997 album Calling All Stations, and was on their tour for their 1998 tour. He also played on John Mayer's breakthrough album Room for Squares, and has also played with Jason Mraz, Joss Stone, and Elena Davis. So anyway, those 19 artists are all going to be doing sessions at PASIC, and if you're not attending PASIC, it's important that this year they're also live streaming some of these clinics. So you have to pay some kind of fee, but if you can't make it to PASIC, that's a really great opportunity to still take advantage of seeing some of these artists in action. So I'm curious, were there a lot of new names on that for you guys, or did you recognize most of them?
Yeah, there were a lot of new names, but obviously a lot of them have played with artists that we know.
Right, of course.
Yeah, I nailed that Michael Jackson guy. Like I got it right. Yeah.
All right.
I was right.
Just to be clear, Jim Riley and John Riley, this is going to make me sound so stupid to ask this, but they're not related. That's correct, right?
No.
I don't think so.
They both went to North Texas. I know that. I just didn't know if I didn't think they were cousins or something like that, but I thought I'd ask.
Good. No, that's a very good question. Also, a fun little fact: Mark Juliana, who is I think the only person. No, I know Mark and I know John Riley, but Mark just played on the latest David Bowie album.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which is totally awesome. So anybody,
awesome.
huge shout out for the new David Bowie album.
Woo!
I didn't know there was a new David Bowie album. I need to go.
Either.
David Bowie was just that guy on that Labyrinth
It's new
movie.
as in a year ago, but
Still, I didn't even know that. I gotta go. I'd see you guys. I'm gonna go listen to that.
yeah. I mean, I appreciate all the people who you've listed, but Mark Juliana is somebody. Since we're on him, is somebody who's a very unique and just somebody who's really inspiring to me as somebody who I don't play a whole lot of drum set. I played the drum set in my brother's band when Lewis Nash shows up a little bit late, but besides that, I don't play a whole lot of drum set because there's so many amazing drum set players here. But Mark Juliana's influence expands beyond the drum set for me. And like back, he used to work with Avishai Cohen when he was really young, out of school, and that's new, fresh way of playing and hyper sensitivity to rhythm and groove. And you can find him on like with Brad Meldau as a duo, and now he does beat music, and he's also playing with Donnie McCaslin, and all that stuff is just hyper awesome. So if you haven't heard him play before, all of you people out in cyberspace, he would be a great person to go check out.
Cool. Yeah, and I was even thinking, as I was looking up each of these people, I was like adding all of this music to my playlist of stuff that sounded interesting. So if you're ever looking for new tunes, or new stuff to check out, I think that's a great way is to look up some of these drummers and see who they're playing with, get you kind of out of the mainstream a little bit.
Hey, Mike, can I shoot you a Facebook question?
Oh, yeah, a question from Facebook. We're not going to Facebook right now, are we?
Right, question from Facebook.
Okay.
How do I add friends?
Well, you said you don't do a whole lot of drum set where you are, and this question pertains to where you are, so I thought I'd start with that. Reed asks, how were you able to get into the new music scene in New York City, and what are some things you did to start getting involved in new music in general?
Great. I'll answer the second one first. The getting into new music was something that came just as a result of being involved in music. So a lot of people tend to think that I'm a new music person, or one is a new music person, and therefore it excludes them from other activities, which is sadly sometimes the case, and sometimes people bring it on themselves by being what I refer to as a new music snob, like one of the people who say, well, if you're not sawing an instrument in half, or if you can hum the melody, then it doesn't count, and I don't want to deal with it. There's a lot of people out there like that, and it's a very exclusive club, but I feel like new music is a very inclusive activity which just goes alongside every other style of music that we ever play. So the way I get into new music was just being around people who create music today. So through contemporary improvisation, and also through hanging out with composers and having people who ask you questions like, well, one of my favorite things that I can remember from undergrad was me and this composer, I don't know, something well past midnight in the music building at Lawrence, going around and trying to see everything that we could bow. So like light fixtures and stairs, and of course it got really crazy really fast because we were running around the conservatory with bows at 2:30 in the morning or whatever. But it's that kind of mentality that I think is so awesome about new music.
You shouldn't run with your bow.
It's always tip out.
Safety first. Message from PASIC Angeles.
Yeah, scissors, bows, don't run.
Well, it's like something like if the Penguin was a musician, like the bow would be his weapon of choice.
The Penguin from Batman, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Some young people in our audience. They might not remember the Penguin. Hey, Matthew from Facebook would like to ask.
Casey, sorry, we didn't address the other part of the question about how he got into the New York scene.
Oh, you're right. Good job, Ben.
The New York scene is, I mean, a scene in any city is really difficult to get into, I feel. It doesn't matter where you are. There's just a lot of people in New York, so it's a little bit more difficult to get into any scene. But the way I think I would recommend to anybody who's looking to play in a group with somebody is that you make a connection with them. And I mean, music is all about these personal connections, and that's what makes it awesome, and that's what sometimes frustrates people. So, like, why can't they just know that I'm really good and ask you? So, well, there's a lot of really good people, but you want to be somebody who everyone enjoys working with, and who you can go to, and you can hang out with them, and go watch the Packers game. Go Packers. You can like today's a Sunday, so they're playing right now, but I'm sacrificing that to be here with you all.
Wow.
Yes, no, it's a big deal. No, I'm just kidding.
I think many of the Packers players are watching this too in the locker room. I bet they are.
This is live streamed to Lambeau Field, the Jumbotron.
Probably, dude. Yeah, I would expect so.
So my recommendation would be, because when somebody asks this question, generally they're thinking like they're in a situation where they want to be either going out and doing it themselves or projecting onto their students some sort of suggestion. For me, it's know people, and not in a weird schemy way, but like just go to concerts, talk to the people afterwards. Let them know about things that you're doing, and develop a relationship, and then eventually you'll start to be asked to do things because they know that you're excited about what you're doing.
If I could just ask a quick, simple question, and I mean it in like the simplest way. Do you like New York?
It's a very difficult. That's not a simple question.
Right.
I love New York, and then there's parts of New York that I could do without, but you can't choose like that. I think the thing that if I am to explain New York to somebody about the greatest things about New York, is that if you like something, there's somebody here who does it really, really well. So if you really like food from the country of Jordan, there's somebody here that makes great Jordanian food. And if you really like the music of Lachenmann, it's going to get played here. So
that's sort of what Sean Tilburg said about Shanghai, or where in China was. Yeah, Hong Kong.
Oh yeah.
He just said like it was kind of funny, but yeah, he said there's like anything you
want, they got it.
I want to go.
Anything you want is there. Hey, so Matthew from Facebook would like to ask Mike, do you have any tips or experiences on post-grad burnout?
Cool. Yeah, what I'm guessing Matt's talking about is the time that like after you graduate from somewhere, you could settle into a rut of some kind, of like maybe you get out of school and you don't have enough concertizing to make a living, so you're maybe doing some other things like non-musical jobs or something, and then that begins to get into a rut, and then maybe eventually you find yourself a few years down the road and you think I'm not really happy with where I am. I'm guessing that's what he's saying. So Matt, if I'm wrong, contact me and we can chat about it later. But I will answer the question I've formed for myself. I think that there's always something to be exploring, and for me, a lot of things that it takes a different perspective on things to really explore what's beautiful about the place that you live in. And sometimes you don't understand how beautiful where you are is and the things that you have around you unless you go somewhere else. And then you can really be attuned to different kinds of things. So it's kind of a costly thing, but for me, one of the most exciting things is traveling. So even if it's just taking a car trip to a new city, that would be a recommendation that I would have for somebody who feels like they may not be experiencing that same joy. And as you travel, you get to meet new people, you get to experience new environments, and those can really help you see the beauty in the world around you as you are. I don't know. What do you think? Does that resonate with anybody?
Yeah, I just finished reading the book Creativity by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and the last chapter is about enhancing personal creativity, and he has little kind of tips and steps, and I think I'll end up talking about them mostly on the next episode, but really quickly when he talks about awakening your personal creativity, which to me translates to how to get over burnout. He says creative people are curious and interested and try to be surprised by something every day. And that sounds a lot like what you're saying, Mike, of, you don't see the beauty of where you are till you're gone, but if maybe you're looking for it, trying to get surprised by something, whether it's musical and something you're supposed to find surprising, or whether it's this really pretty flower that you ran by in the morning, perhaps all of those things can help lift out of a burnout state.
Good call. Yeah, take a new route home every day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think burnout and being in like a rut are two different things. I feel like burnout's easy. You just like relax, and you just need to like be away from the thing that burnt you out. But I feel like and I guess he said burnout specifically, but I feel like we're already talking about kind of a blend of burnout slash, a rut, really. Anyway, I don't know.
You're thinking of burnout as like exhaustion, and a rut as disinterest or something?
Yeah, or like I think it's people get people get troubled when they get out of school, because school like does everything for you, and it's like, here's where you are now, here's what you're doing then, and then when you're done with that, you're going to work on this.
Yep.
And then you do that, and like everything's set up for you. But I think what's nice about what Mike just said is you don't know how beautiful the place you're in might be, and you need to go out and kind of make those tasks for yourself. And that's, I don't know, kind of really how a career should grow, I would think.
I think also people, I mean, I'm totally with you, Mike, on the traveling thing. Traveling always inspires and motivates me, but I think people do too. So I think in that situation that you described, like trying to meet some new people, or going to a concert that you might have not otherwise gone to, or going to an art museum, or just finding some inspiration outside of your daily life, you know. But trying to associate yourself with a different crowd of people, or going to a concert, and like you said before, introducing yourself afterwards, and potentially meeting some new collaborators or some people who might push you into something different.
Definitely.
Introduce you to something different.
Okay. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Ben, Megan, nice job. Thanks so much. Great segments as always. And yeah, this was episode 14, and we'll see you guys next time. I think our next guest is
Gordon Stout.
Gordon Stout.
Whoa, Gordon freaking Stout. That's so cool. Okay,
I'm not
everyone.
worthy.
Last thing, we did have other Facebook questions, but they kind of trickled in after we started, so I'm sorry if we didn't get to your Facebook questions. Really appreciate you guys sending in the questions. It does actually really help the podcast and gives us cool talking points that we don't have to invent ourselves, so it's actually really helpful. So thank you so much for the questions, and I hope you please continue them. Okay, later, Mike. Thanks so much. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Megan.